I want to thank Zena Harris for all of her hard work on putting this day together. We started scheming and dreaming about this about a year ago, and Zena and the VIFF team have been working tirelessly over the last 6 months to put it together. And Zena, I just want to thank you for your hard work on this, and I know it's going to be a really exciting day. Thank you, Zena. And over to you.
Thank you. Well, yes, it's super exciting to have you all here. And I'd like to now take a moment to just introduce our moderator as we move into the next couple of sessions. So many of you probably know Prem Gill, CEO of Creative BC, and we're thrilled to have her here moderating the morning sessions. I think there's going to be a lot of great conversation to come. So thank you all for coming early and checking out the great efforts in the city and what we're doing in sustainable production, especially last year with the X-Files. And you're going to have some great conversation here to learn about what's going on with the studios and then what's going on globally. So, so Prem, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. How did you move this down? Oh, it's got actually height. Oh, but it tells you it's got like height requirements. So I'm just gonna look. Visual effects. It's going so loud. Oh, that's actually. Oh my gosh. Okay, stop. Oh my God. Okay, cool. So I don't work in visual effects. Ever, probably. Thank you, Jacqueline and Zena, for pulling all this together, and to the team at Creative BC. I know a lot of them around today. Julie Bernard and Marnie Orr, you should get to know them. They've been, you started talking about it a year ago, but it actually came together really quickly, and we're really proud from Creative BC to be here. And thanks for inviting me to moderate the panels this morning. I also want to thank the city and Mayor Gregor and Sandy and the team, who are great partners with Creative BC in really driving efforts like Real Green forward. And it's actually the 10th anniversary of Real Green, which speaks to the pioneering spirit that Chris spoke of, how this is not just something that appeared overnight. It's actually been something that a lot of you here have been working towards for a long time. For those of you who don't know what Creative BC is, we are a provincial agency. We're funded by the province of British Columbia to support the economic development of the creative industries across creative sectors, and motion picture being a really important part of that. So we're going to get started on the panels. The first one this morning is sustainability at the studios. We all know that the large studios are driving action, as we saw in the video, on sustainability through their internal and corporate mandates. They're tracking greenhouse gas emissions and encouraging sustainable production practices. We're very lucky today that we have some of the major players from the studios who've come up from Los Angeles to talk about this with us today. So we're going to all move over here. We will get to know the panelists a little bit. I'll ask a few questions, then we will try to leave about 15 minutes for questions. So come on up to all of our speakers. I'm not sure where everybody is. See some of you over there.
So Shannon Bart is the Sustainability Director from NBC Universal. Shannon is responsible for overseeing the Sustainable Production Program as well as sustainable initiatives on the Universal Studios lot. So that will be interesting to really hear more about. Lisa Day, the energy initiatives for Fox Films Entertainment. Lisa was the Global Projects Director for the Earth Communications Office, a nonprofit environmental group where she worked on climate issues for over 10 years. Lisa's now the Managing Sustainable, these are big words for me to say this morning, Sustainable Initiatives for 20th Century Fox, taking the studio carbon neutral in 2010, and in addition to environmental and energy initiatives on the lot and in all international offices for Fox Films Entertainment. Mike Slavich is the Director of Sustainability for Warner Brothers Entertainment, and he's responsible for the day-to-day operations and long-term strategies of all sustainable programs, including waste reduction, energy conservation, environmental procurement, green design, and environmental education and outreach. Heidi Kinberg is Heidi Kinberg-Goss, Manager of Environmental Sustainability at Sony Pictures. And she has a degree in telecommunications and film from SDSU and is also leading the charge at Sony. So great representation across the studios here today. I'm going to just ask you all to take a couple of minutes. We'll start with Mike to just tell us a little bit about how this all started for you at your particular studios and give us a little bit of background.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me today. I'm in green production heaven. Being up here in Vancouver, it's such a pleasant place to be, meeting with many of our shows in recent days. I'm excited to be part of this panel with my friends and colleagues from the other studios, and then really interested to learn also from some of the other panelists later today. So my kind of journey to green production started, really, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I actually started in development and then moved over into marketing and brand management at Universal. Started to make a career change about 12 years ago and found an opportunity at Warner Brothers to combine my experience in the industry with my passion for environmental sustainability. Warner Brothers had actually had a program in place for a number of years, focusing on really their facility first, dating back 25 years ago to when they started their recycling programs, and then later on energy efficiency, renewable energy projects. And then when I came on in 2005, started really turning our attention towards production a little bit more. So for the past 10 years, I've been laser focused on sustainability. At the studio in Burbank is where I'm based, but our productions operate all over the world, and we also have a fairly new studio in outside of London at Leavesden. So, we approach it really. The facilities are the foundation of our sustainable business practices. We try and invest in infrastructure that allows the productions that are on our lot, whether they're our productions or third-party productions, to reduce waste. Putting systems in place for waste reduction, recycling, composting, energy-efficient facilities, house lights for stages, also set lighting equipment from our different departments that we rent out to productions to help them reduce their energy usage. So, when we go out and film in other locations, we rely on partners, vendors, other facilities to help us try and continue doing what we're doing, and then also communicating with our other colleagues at other industries to try and work together towards a common goal and kind of accelerate the change that we really know is happening.
Hi, my name is Shannon Bart. I'm the Sustainability Director at NBC Universal. I started out freelancing in primarily commercial and film production. I started out actually as a grip electric swing, and I've worked in the art department and the AD department and also the production office. And I think about 10 years ago when I was working on some productions, I kind of decided that there had to be a better way, and I wanted to try to be part of that change. And so I started working on productions, really trying to focus on greening, and I wasn't even sure what that meant at the time. What does a green production mean? What I could, and then started trying to do that full-time consulting, and then had the wonderful opportunity to join NBC Universal and help to develop their sustainable production program. And that was about 7 years ago now. And so we've developed a program that is rolled out on our television productions and feature films wherever they are in the world. We've had a number of productions here in Vancouver, and like Mike said, it's always great working with Vancouver productions. Sometimes when we speak with a production in a different city and they say, well, that's absolutely impossible to do on production, I say, well, they do it in Vancouver. And they kind of figured it out there. So you are already a shining green star, and it's such an honor to be here and to participate in this panel today. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Day, and I'm the Director of Sustainability for 20th Century Fox, and you've already gotten to see a little bit of our efforts here. But I got started in this, I actually came from the other side. I came from the nonprofit community, so I worked at a nonprofit environmental group in Los Angeles for 10 years. But it was a group that really worked with the entertainment industry, more from the communications side, but I really did kind of, at that stage, kind of start looking at production, and we did a lot of work for the industry at that point in looking at materials, and this would have been in the 80s and 90s. We'll give away my age a little bit there, how long I've been doing this. I left the nonprofit community and actually went to work for Participant Media, which is a small production company founded by one of the co-founders of eBay, whose mission is to really use film and television to talk about social issues. And it just so happened I moved over there at the exact same time that they started working on a little documentary called An Inconvenient Truth. So I worked with Vice President Gore for 2 years on that movie and all of the kind of campaign and everything that came after it. And that sort of created my job that I moved over to at Fox because Gore did his presentation for Rupert Murdoch and convinced Rupert Murdoch at such a point that he actually made the decision to take what was then News Corporation carbon neutral by 2010. And they needed somebody at the studio in Los Angeles who kind of understood what that meant in terms of film and television production in a studio and how you figured out the carbon impact of that whole side of the world. And I made the move over to Fox 10 years ago, so I've been at Fox for 10 years now working on it. I do the cross, so I work on the facility side as well, doing sustainability for our studio in LA and our studio in Australia. And then I work with all of our feature films and television shows, no matter where they are around the world. And I'll just echo everybody's statement that it is so much easier to do this in Vancouver. I love when our productions come up here and work because I really do feel like what the city offers is great, but I also do feel like we have a much more connected and sustainably minded crew for the most part here in Vancouver. And so thank all of you for what you do and your interest in this.
Ditto.
Look at it.
No, it's wonderful to be here. We're really excited that not just a session, but an entire day. So a really quick shout out to Zena and Kelsey because they're change makers on the ground here in Vancouver from our perspective. And so that's really wonderful to bring that to the ground level and bring it to our productions. I started in 2008 at Sony Pictures Entertainment. I have my background in production, but had been out of it for several years, trying to stay with my family a little bit more. We all know production's crazy. And came back and got a corporate job at Sony. Mine is a story of good timing. It was the exact same time that the sustainability department was being formed, and coincidentally when I was going back to get a master's in sustainability. So they realized as the department grew that they needed people to work on their widget, which was productions, features, and television shows, and I was fortunate to get that position. So that was several years after I started at SPE and several years ago now. And so currently, in regard to sustainability and hazardous waste, I oversee all of SPE's productions, meaning Columbia, Screen Gems, and TriStar, and their television shows, so Sony Picture Television shows. And we do carbon footprinting, we do best practices. We'll talk about how collaborative we are, which is one of the best things about our positions at the studios, if I can speak for all of us. But to start, we also have a slide. So I think we have a clicker. Okay, sorry about that. It's the first slide, and it's, oops, wait, I want to go back. Okay. So in addition to talking about carbon footprinting and best practices at Sony, we have different areas of focus, and again, we'll all touch on all of this. But we talk about waste, specifically food waste and not wasting food, so food donations is a big thing, and composting, which you do really well here, and we have a lot of struggles with in other areas. We talk about alternative fuels, specifically biodiesel and alternative to fuels, so thinking outside of the box. And we also talk about on-screen opportunities. So that was touched on in the X-Files. When you have a story that allows for characters to model sustainable behaviors, that has the huge potential to influence the viewers. So we have conversations about all of these topics with all of our productions.
That's so interesting, working it into the scripts. That in the humorous way it worked in the X-Files, but that you're actually encouraging that. That's so interesting. So this is pretty great to have Warner, Sony, Fox, NBC here with us, and you guys your companies have all been in British Columbia and Vancouver producing for so many years. Was it? You've all said that it's easier to do this in this jurisdiction than some others. But what were sort of the first shows that maybe were Vancouver or elsewhere that was sort of your first time you sort of tackled greening an entire show, or at least starting to introduce something? Because I think that's always interesting, like examples of an actual production that maybe thought they were green, but they actually weren't doing it, and how you tackled that. Maybe we'll start at this end this time.
Sure. So we also have a guest in the audience, Emily O'Brien for Earth Angel, and she'll be speaking later. The first time that Sony Pictures tackled it was with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. We made a similar sizzle reel that highlighted all of our efforts, but it was a huge tentpole, and we also did a cause marketing campaign with Earth Hour over that. And we really documented for the first time all of our physical production efforts of, waste reduction, and we just really took it to a level that we hadn't taken it to before, and we're public about our efforts for the first time on a big tentpole.
And I guess I was actually at Sony ImageWorks yesterday in town here, and we were also talking about, on the visual effects side, the fact that the entire there's no computers, like they're all linked in via a big giant pipe that goes into the Sony building into a some what is it called, like a server farm somewhere in Washington State, but that is also, and using low screen monitors, that it actually extends, which not just from the physical production of something like Spider-Man, but into the visual effects.
Yeah, so we do. We take it from pre-production to post, and more or less on any given production, given the production, given the opportunities that you have wherever it is, and carrying it through to our facilities and to our post-production.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Lisa, a non-X-Files example from Fox. I'm also actually curious if Rupert Murdoch achieved his 2010 goal of...
We did.
You did,
We did,
hey?
yeah. So we became, I think, the largest media company in the world to go carbon neutral in 2010. So he did, yeah. He stuck with it, which is great. And now we have a lot of corporate goals that are, moving kind of beyond that carbon neutral idea. So we have actual reduction targets in terms of, climate, in terms of water, in terms of waste, and not just company-wide. We actually do also have specific targets for physical production, so for both our television shows and our feature films in terms of carbon emissions. And those goals are set for 2020, so we're 4 years and rapidly approaching on those goals. So we'll see how we're doing. We're redoing our benchmarks this year to kind of see how we are edging towards those goals. But if we're talking about kind of the first place that we tackled it, it just so happened when this initiative launched in 2007 that we had 2 feature films in prep here in Vancouver. And it just coincidentally happened to be that those were kind of the 2 first features that we really took a hard look at this and started to figure out. And one of them was the X-Files movie. And the other one was The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves. So we had those 2 films going simultaneously here in Vancouver. So it's kind of full circle for me being back here, that the first time we really took a deep dive and looked at sustainability in physical production, it just happened to be here in Vancouver. But we've looked at other shows. I mean, I work on all of our shows with it, but some of our larger efforts, the last season of 24, which was filmed in the UK, we took a deep dive and looked at that one and did a lot of work with it as well. We're doing the current 24, the new 24, which is filming in Atlanta. So that's been an interesting one to take a look at as well.
Great.
Yeah.
And from NBC?
Hi, yeah. So when I first started, the direction I got, it wasn't really going into a deep dive in one production. The company had done that the year before I started on Away We Go. It's a focus feature film. But we wanted to take some of the best practice that we'd found and try to lift all of our productions up to a certain level. So when I first started, I actually jumped right into television. We did have a film up here, Charlie St. Cloud, but I came up here and visited them and spoke with Psych. The television show was on up here as well, and then kind of traveled around to all of our major production centers in New York and Toronto and Atlanta, and I spoke to the crew, because I think the crew and the producers, what's best as far as where the impacts are, and what you see on a day-to-day, and developed, back then in 2009, we published the Green 17 that we required all of our productions to do across the board. And that program has evolved over the years. We've learned, and then we've dived deep into certain issues with the collaboration, and I think we'll get into this a little bit later, with the collaboration of all the studios, diving into sustainable lumber, diving into food donations. That was one of the first big initiatives I did across all of our productions. I work with about 60 productions a year with pilots that comes up to like 90, but it's hard to support all the pilots really well. But we, in 2009, launched an official food donation program. So all the excess catering and all excess food from productions, we started donating to local nonprofits, and Really started in New York City and then Toronto and then LA. And we're looking at really trying to get it going as an industry in Vancouver here as well. Um, and yeah, it's been really exciting. And actually, do you have the clicker? So the program's evolved. We've published guides, we've published lists and requirements and best practices. And when you have a production that has never really, or a producing team that has never really thought about green before, you kind of, in a 1 hour meeting, talk about so many different things. You talk about energy and what does that mean. So, and you talk about waste, and you talk about recycling, and you talk about reducing materials, and where are you sourcing it from, and you talk about how to track it. And so just at the end of last year, we developed 3 infographics that display or that kind of visualize all of the initiatives and best practices that we expect to see on our productions. And we've been using this with our shows for this year, for 2016. And it's been really helpful. So this looks exactly like every Vancouver production office, right, you've ever seen.
I recognize some of those people.
But I mean, you really do up here in Vancouver. A lot of this stuff is just normal. You have the recycling and compost in the kitchen. You have dishes. You have water coolers and not bottled water. The stages. We talk to all of our productions about the wood they're sourcing, where it's coming from. We track it to make sure that we are getting the best we can. We try to track it as much as we can. Of course, recycling, food donations are down here. One of our big initiatives right now is LED set lighting. And it's been helpful because Universal has its own line of LED set lighting out of our set lighting department called MacTech LED. But we did a huge push where we met with our executives and our DPs and our gaffers on every single production that was starting up on our Universal lot, and really encouraged them to use as much LED lighting as possible. And last television season, we tripled the amount of LED lighting used across all of our TV productions on the Universal lot. And so what's really exciting about that is, I totally hijacked this question. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
I just realized.
It's interesting.
You asked about the first production.
oh, Mike, I
But
was
totally
gonna ask
hijacked. Exciting with that is that it.
Yeah.
And I know Mike can talk about this too, but like, I do see LED lighting as the future of filmmaking, and it's really exciting that the technology's come a long way. And then I'll just leave you on the last one. Is some of the stuff that we're doing on location.
That's so great. And so, Mike, you said, I think you told me earlier, there's 9 Warner shows in Vancouver right now.
Sure.
You went and saw them all yesterday.
Yeah. Well, the last 2 days, actually. And I took SkyTrain. It was lovely, by the way.
And public transit, even better.
Yeah. So I just quickly, to answer the question about kind of the earliest experiences in production, kind of where this started, and maybe we'll transition into where it's going. But kind of, my first experience really was with Syriana. That was 2006. So that was our first carbon neutral production. And really, this was before a lot of kind of the best practices had been outlined. But so the focus there was really on trying to quantify what is the carbon footprint of a production, and then how do you offset that through, in that case, it was investments in renewable energy projects like wind and methane capture. The Closer was one of the first shows that we sat down with Kira Sedgwick, filming in Los Angeles, where we kind of were going department by department. What are the opportunities within each of the groups? Things like reusable water bottles, compost and compostable products. That was kind of a new thing at that time. Really educating the crew on what it is that they can do department by department. On the feature side, in 2009, we had a film, Valentine's Day, that was filming on our lot in Burbank, and they really wanted to use biodiesel. They were using a mobile solar unit that was like a 40-foot rig that they were hauling around. That was really a prototype for trying to get base camp to be kind of off the grid, or even off diesel, really. And what I think is interesting about those examples is, this is literally the bottle that they distributed on the Closer. I've been using it for 10 years now. And I'm sure many of the crew members that were on that show are still using those too. So it puts a habit in motion, I think, when you institute these things. And, we're a community of creatives, and I think the ideas spread, and you want to kind of start somewhere and kind of continue that. And with the example of Valentine's Day, they wanted to use biodiesel, so we brought 2,000-gallon biodiesel tanks to our lot, and then our transportation department took them and upgraded them, and we've been using them ever since. So we've been providing B20 biodiesel to our productions for the past 6 years, no issues. whatsoever. And our transportation captains have tested up to B99, and that worked as well, but we were sticking with B20. And so, it's an option to our production. So a lot of what we're trying to do is identify alternatives, institute, pilot programs, try things out, make sure that they work or modify them as needed to make sure that they are viable, from a cost standpoint, from a production reliability standpoint, and then, try and scale it up. And that's really our challenge is how we kind of know where we need to go. LED lighting, I totally agree, is a game changer. It's going to reduce the amount of diesel that we need to use on location. For us in Los Angeles, by the way, it's having a little rain is really a refreshing thing for us. It's been pushing 50 degrees Celsius for weeks on end down there, and so when it's that warm and you have 5K lights, 10K lights hanging on a stage, it heats up that stage. So our set lighting department has also developed solid state space lights that replace 5K lights. We have 150 of them that are all out rented to our shows, and it dramatically increases or decreases the amount of power that we need to use, the amount of air conditioning that we need to cool the stages. The sets are quieter, the sets are more comfortable for the cast and crew. The challenge is oftentimes the availability of this equipment, and sometimes it's the cost, but we need to look at the full cost of what we're doing. The fuel that we're using to power the generators that are powering the lights. All of this comes into play, and so what we're able to do, we're looking at 25 productions at a time, and we're kind of looking what New York is doing and what Vancouver is doing and what we're doing in Burbank and Atlanta and London and everywhere. So, and all these regions have different infrastructures, different vendors that are available to them, different products that are available. So, it's exciting for us, and then, so we're working within our own studios, but then we're also collaborating. You're kind of sitting in on one of our conference calls because we do this pretty much every week. And it requires, I always say, every crew member really needs to participate. It's not just one person that's going to come in and green your show. It's really participation by every single crew member. If it's a writer, they're integrating the content into the site. If it's the craftsperson, they're ordering the food, they're making sure their products are compostable. Set lighting, construction, transportation, no idling, all those things matter. So, our challenge is to, kind of understand what's the latest and greatest, communicate that back out to our crew, get the feedback of what the challenges are, and then try and address those, and a lot of problem solving.
Interesting. So when you started, you've all sort of talked about the evolution a little bit and what you see coming and how you're trying to encourage more, even the cost might be high to get hybrid vehicles, but in the long term, there is a payoff. What do you think that this community could do that we're not doing that would be supportive of all of your efforts as a group, but also as individual studios, that you could see us that we should be thinking about, that we think we're the greenest and we're great at all of this stuff, but what are we not doing? Can of worms?
Funny you ask.
Food donation seems to be the area where it's an opportunity here that's available. There's a little bit of misinformation that it's not legal, it's not okay, there's some health regulations around it. It's not true. It's perfectly legal. You're perfectly covered. You have the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, who has the Food Runner program that will happily work with productions. We talked with them yesterday. And many local recipients that would be happy to take your prepared but unserved catered food and any dry goods that you have at the end of the shoot.
And this is really impactful.
That's doable, right?
It's really impactful. I mean, we've been, across our productions, we donate at least about 28 to 30,000 meals worth of food. And it's like 1 or 2 pans of catering every day. And when we first start a program in a city, a lot of times production or caterers say, oh, I really don't have that much left over. Look, well, we know, but if you're just 1 tray of chicken or a couple trays of pasta salad, like all of that does add up. And you can set up programs where we have refrigerators that, all the food goes in the refrigerator, the nonprofit comes in the morning and empties it and serves it to people that afternoon. So if you don't think you have that much leftover food, I would try to look again, because you probably do. And it is something that has been really successful for all of us in a lot of different markets, and that we aren't doing here yet.
Yeah, I would add, again, LED, it's critical and it's an evolving technology, but I just don't see a lot of inventory here that, so I think that we need to kind of build that up a little bit. And then biodiesel, I know that there's some concerns with gelling and when the temperature drops below a certain level, but many times of the year that's not an issue, and so I think that's an opportunity here as well. And I think my mantra is always to kind of reduce waste in the first place. I mean, a lot of times we're trying to chase materials. Okay, we got to find containers to put the materials in. We need to find a hauler to take the materials to a place. But I think we're still seeing a lot of paper usage. I think that we have a lot of, we need to wean ourselves a little bit off of the hard copies of paper and do embrace technology a little bit more in digital distribution of documents, because oftentimes we're doing parallel processes where we're doing a hard copy distribution, and then we're also sending out emails with those digital documents. So I think that people are used to holding on to something, and we need to kind of embrace the future and rely less on paper production.
I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, or we... Oh, okay, so let's open it up for some questions. Or who's going to tackle the food thing first? Sandy. Just over here.
Hi, I'm Sandy, and I am the Senior Manager for Film and Special Events at the City of Vancouver. I've spoken to you before, Mike, I think, when we were doing the article with Mary Elizabeth. For me, and this touches on a lot of things, crew conduct, all that stuff, what do you do to really get this to saturate right down to that line crew? It's a conversation that we're having constantly with Creative BC and the productions, trying to get that mindset change, whether it's being courteous to the public or recycling. What have you done to really saturate and incentivize people to buy in, besides saying you're fired? Anybody can take it.
Yeah, I'll start with it. That is honestly one of the hardest things. I mean, especially because we're all based in Los Angeles, obviously, so we're not here. We can't come to the shows every day. We can't talk to everybody on the shows. So I think there's a couple of different routes to it. The first is when we're lucky enough to have the funding to be able to hire somebody locally. I've been lucky enough, obviously, to hire Zena and have Zena to work with Kelsey with Keep It Green Recycling. But I'll maybe spoil a conversation for later, but I have also heard that there's discussions at the Creative BC level talking about introducing this concept into the orientation and the training for everybody who's working in the community. And I think that's going to be absolutely critical, that it's something they're hearing before they even get to set, and it's something they've been introduced to. So it's not us trying to talk to everybody, or somebody on set trying to talk to everybody. It's people who are coming in with this already kind of in the back of their minds, that I should be seeing these things, I should be doing these things. This is the way the business works. This is the new normal, if you will.
And I think it really does have to start at the top. If you don't have a UPM that is vocally supportive of the initiatives, you're setting up a lot of people to fail. So you really have to, and maybe that's part of educate. We always, on our calls, require that the UPM be on the calls. We have multiple calls with department heads as well. But I'm a random person in LA that's calling a transportation captain. You really have to have the UPM echoing and setting goals for what they want to accomplish. Another challenge, and I think we wanted to talk about this, but another challenge that when we're looking at the impacts of production, there is a pretty big impact with catering and the type of food that is served. And we weren't, as a team, we collaborate a lot, and we're trying to figure out how do we start the conversation about serving less beef or eating less red meat. And I had no idea how to start that conversation with the shows. And the producer of Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce here in Vancouver actually made a decision this season, and they have decided to only serve beef once a week, and they've completely removed it from craft service and production office snacks and all of that. And their caterer is saying that they used to purchase 150 pounds of beef a week, and now they're only purchasing 40 or 50. And so they're basically reducing 100 pounds of beef a week, which is actually, from an environmental standpoint, really a huge impact. And the crew, I don't know if they even know that that's happening. They might have noticed that the menu's a little bit different, but that's something that happened at the top. The producer made a decision, and that's, I'll give her a shout out. I know she's here, Clara George. She's here. but we were talking about it yesterday, and it's like, what if half of the Vancouver productions did that, where they reduced their beef consumption to once a week? I mean, that's 2,000 pounds of red meat a week. So there's little things like that, decisions that can be made at the top that really don't change the quality of the product you're serving, but have really, really good benefits.
And I was just say, just on the whole beef thing, if you guys don't know, I mean, I'm sure you probably heard about it, but I heard a great statistic on it a couple of weeks ago, which is eating a quarter-pound cheeseburger is the equivalent of driving a Prius 47 miles in terms of carbon impact. So, yeah, that's one you can understand.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is it has to come from a lot of different angles. So from the studio level, we have these conversations, and then if you have a key producer or UPM on the show that can drive these things, that's excellent. If you have the resource to put somebody on the ground, then there's more possibility for daily impact. And then the last thing is we wanted to talk about our success in our lumber efforts. And driving really the supply chain change. So the preferred mahogany or Luan 4x8 and 4x10 ply sheets that everybody uses to build sets are traditionally unsustainable. And so through conversations with producers and construction coordinators and vendors and nonprofits and going all the way back through the supply chain to the mills, really researching this and having everybody involved has driven change. So now you can get sustainable FSC Luan mahogany here in both sizes. We're looking at alternatives. We've vetted an alternative, which is coming to you soon. And, so again, just the idea of having it come from all different angles. So if you have an interest, you have an idea, gather the troops and look at it from every angle.
I think we probably have time for one more question. There's anything out there? Middle over here. Someone right there.
I'm actually looking at this from a slightly different point of view in terms of the impact that cars have in the film industry. And the reason I'm saying this is because, I've worked on productions as a performer and before that background. And it seems to me that there is a lot of need to have a car. I recently had to buy a car. I didn't want to buy a car, but I had to buy a car. Now, I'm just wondering, is there anything that can be done about shuttling people or getting, when you have these productions where you can actually provide some transportation for people to get to sets that are difficult to get to? It's hard sometimes to rely on even public transit, which I did a lot, but you want people to be there on time and everything. And so I'm wondering, is this anything you've considered? Because it's really, to me, a very automotive-driven industry as well.
Yeah. So, yes, excellent question.
Well, you're exactly right. We have a sample. This is what we call the PEAR report, the Production Environmental Accounting Report, and all of us use this. We track data on production. And if you look here in this beautiful pie chart, the red is fuel, and that's the majority of the carbon impact, and a lot of that's coming from transportation. A lot of our shows do provide shuttles to hard-to-get-to locations, but it probably could be done much more. It is a challenge. It is a big challenge. Public transportation doesn't necessarily run on the same schedules as production, nor do you want to take that extra time after you've worked a 14-hour day. I am aware of a number of shows that do provide shuttles where you drive to the stage or you drive to a common location and take shuttles, but it doesn't happen all the time.
Is there any last comments of something that we didn't talk about today that you wanted to make sure we get on the table from each of you?
Actually, it was up for a minute, but just on the collaborative side, again, all of us in the United States, all the major studios work with the Producers Guild and their PGA Green Committee, and together we fund and create this website, greenproductionguide.com, and it is kind of a one-stop shop for all of your sustainability needs on production. So we have best practices on there that are harmonized across all of us. The carbon calculator is up there. We have a lumber worksheet, so you can track the lumber and the types of lumber that you're using. And the food, there's information on food donations as well, including, any legal documents and things that you need. There's also a searchable database. So if you are looking for a source for biodiesel in Greater Vancouver, you can find it on that site. If you're looking for somebody who sells compostable products, you should be able to find any of it on that website. If you know of other vendors in Vancouver that
what a
offer
great
things,
source.
you can add them to the website. But it's really the idea that, again, we're based in Los Angeles. We have productions all over the world. We don't always know the situation in all of those cities where they may be. And this is our way to kind of share the resources in terms of, pointing our productions in the direction where they can find the information they need to find.
What a great resource. Amazing. Anything else, anybody?
I have a couple final thoughts.
Sure.
I always say that the three challenges of green production are cost, convenience, and culture. And I think cost is often a misperception. I think sometimes there's an upfront cost or an investment. For the most part, if you use less resources, you spend less money. So I think that's not a challenge. Convenience, we're busy. We understand that the productions have got long days. They're working really hard. And then culture is hard to change. And so, and it really comes down to integration. When we come in and we try and get them to do something in addition to what they're already having to do, it's really difficult. So what we're trying to do is just do things differently, do things more efficiently, streamline the productions, make their lives easier. How do we get there? What are the technical products, solutions, software, the vendor partnerships that we can find? How can we enable the productions to do their jobs better and ultimately put a better product up on the screen that has a lower carbon footprint? So that's, I think, where we're all trying to go. And I just want to say thank you again for having me and us here today. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the panels and hearing what they have to say as well.
Yeah, well, thank you all. I think this is a great kickoff, and your insights and your best practices, I think we all learned some new things, and it's, because we have such a focus in our culture here on the green economy and climate change, that sometimes we don't even think about the things that, we think we've got it done or we've got it right. But there's definitely a lot of best practices to learn from the larger studios to, smaller production companies, that everybody is in it together. So thank you very much. We're gonna shift. So you guys are all around today if people have questions during any of the breaks, but we're going to shift to our next panel. I'm not going to go to the podium again. And we're going to look at things from a global perspective. So thank you again. Thanks, guys. So we're going to do a bit of a switcheroo in our next session.